All right, welcome back to another Fabric Tip Friday. This one's going to be probably a little long one. Several people's been asking me about doing one on this subject, and it just happened that next door here, Brian, my cousin at Central Arkansas Aircraft Repair, had a set of these tail feathers for a Maul coming through. I'm going to go over what I believe is done by Maul on covering their tail feathers. It's a certain technique that they use. But first I'm going to go over, I'm not going to get into the legal part of what you can and can't do. We all know that you could cover this just like a Super Cub and you could stitch it and do the normal procedure. But whether that falls in the legal part of because the Maul aircraft was done a certain way, I'm not sure what you can do beyond that. At AirTech Coatings, we don't reach out into the world and your 4313 are telling you how to do a certain airplane. Ours is the system, it's STC, it's legal, then you have to do the appropriate things for that aircraft. If that aircraft specifically called for 101 fabric, then you got to follow that rule. We don't step out and say, oh, but you can go ahead and stitch it because we sell stitching cord and all that. We don't get into the legal part of that. Also, you get into a situation that, I'm gonna be quite blunt, if a lot of this stuff is beyond your pay grade, you might ought to be getting with a company or something to cover your airplane. I see too many people that watch these videos and they get knee deep or neck deep into this, and they find out that they can't do what they want to do as far as watching the video. Well, what they've done is they basically threw under the bus the professional that does it for a living. That ain't to say that someone can't learn this process or these processes on covering, but what I'm gonna cover is specifically what me and Brian has found. I've talked with Brent before, I've been over to the Maul, they use some AirTech products in their factory. This is a 99 model, and uncovering it, this has not been reprimed. It looks this way uncovered. He did a lot of cleaning. I don't know in 99 if they were using AirTech glue. I know some of this glue was not AirTech, but they're the factory. They can do what they want to do as far as what they held the fabric down with. Now they use UA55. So what I'm going to talk about is the UA55 doing this process. What it is on a Maul aircraft is we normally cover a stab or a wing or whatever, and then you put a reinforcement down, and then you stitch the fabric down to hold the fabric to the rib or to whatever structure you have it. I truly believe, some people says it was for repairability because you could take a bay loose or whatever. Well, the way this goes around, you're not going to take one bay loose without starting at one end and completely disassembling to do a repair. AirTech repairs very easily by sanding it back to the primer, putting your patch directly onto our primer, prime it, paint it, and you're done. Instead of stitching, I believe it was a process that Mr. Maul had come up with, and I did it on my Javron. I did it on a couple experimental planes, that instead of stitching, what they're doing is this rib is cupped that way. This is the internal side of the U shape of this. So what they're basically are doing is, first off, you put UA55 thick glue on all of your parts that's going to be glued. Well, normally you would put UA55 around this, around your hinges, on the top of this, because you'll wet it through after you shrink it in or whatever. But with this, you're also going to wet in this flat side. And what I normally do, I have a lot of people, they'll want to make the comment, oh, this is great, I can use scraps, to do my tip. This is the cheapest part of covering. The time and stuff is the most expensive part. Never pick up a piece of scrap off the floor and cover your plane. Once it hits that floor, it's dirty, you just take the stuff off a roll. We don't go in and try to cut this piece perfect. I go ahead and have the piece quite a bit larger. But what you're doing is you're laying the first piece of fabric on, and let's just say this is a long piece, and let's say it's a little better cut or a little longer. Wet it, and you're going to attach it to the high points, and then you're gonna come in with a razor right here and right here. And what you're doing is you're taking this 90 degrees on the flat spot of this rib. Now that takes care of your stitching. That's not gonna come up. Now I have took these parts, these stabs apart and dissected them, and I have seen several ways. I don't know which one's right or wrong, if they did some different things at the factory. I have seen some that took it down the flat side and took it all the way around and then cut it off with a razor. And then once all that's glued down, they glue around here, do your normal end around your hinges. And then once this is all glued, come back with more glue on this side. Lightly shrink this after it's dried for a few hours, lightly shrink it. And then I've seen them take this piece around to here or all the way around. Or I have seen them take the first piece down to the bottom edge of that and let the other piece come flat on the metal and come up, and then that one come around. The first one just go down and the other one come all the way around. If that's gonna be the process you're gonna do, I would let this be the top of the wing so that your bottom piece went on first and went up to here. Your top piece come on and come down and around, and then that piece come under the wing here, which will be an extra seam that it's not gonna show really under the tape, but that way that would happen on the bottom. So if, let's see, this is the bottom, I would come in with the bottom piece first, come up to this edge, have all that ironed down, and you wanna be careful ironing where you've glued down, it may shrink. You wanna get everything down, and then put another good bed of glue all the way around, then the top piece would come here and down and lap around. Now we have took a few of these apart, and Brian has told me this would be where you start. If this is cupped that way, you're gonna start and go this way. Brian has seen some, now they may have been covered somewhere else and not at Maule. I've seen some that went the other way and they brought it up here and they wrapped it around, they tucked it. I don't believe that's a good way of doing it, because you want that vertical shear on the glue. You're never, I watched him taking this stuff apart. It took him 2 days just to get these things uncovered. I mean, you know, the glue just trying to peel it off, far more superior than a stitch or something, because you're basically got a vertical edge of the glue all the way down. But that is basically, you put that first piece down, get everything glued, get your other one down, and what I like to do is go ahead and do the second one and then lay it to the side and go get another piece, and I like to go ahead and let that dry for a half a day. Your next piece is going to, I'm gonna go ahead and trade pieces out here. He's got one that he had started, and he was laying on the side. And let's see, I'll lay it this way. This is the second piece that's already been put on. This is the second piece here. So he's done got a piece. Get that advertisement out of the way. And these things are counterbalanced, so they're pretty heavy. This was one side that he put on, and he put the other side on. And then this is the next piece. So you've got this all the way around. What I like to do is let this dry enough to go ahead and shrink it, because you're fixing to glue to a flat place right here. Within this next piece does the lap joint. You know, we're legal with a 2-inch or so overlap, and that's what they're depending on. And then it will come to the next one and down and up and around. So you want to get that timing out to where, now this is the rudder, so one side is going to show the other as far as that extra one around. Now, like I said, I have seen them just go around the flat rib and around the flat rib and cut them even. And I believe that's perfectly fine, but a lot of times that last one may come all the way around into the fold there. But the reason this needs to be shrinked, you don't want to do a light shrink so you can get a good clean mark on it, because if you do your mark on it, and you get this glued down, and you get them all glued down, and you lightly shrink, and then you come back, now I'm gonna really iron. Now you're pulling this joint. You know, we have the situations on a dark plane that the tape could lightly shrink if it's not glued on good. We use pre-shrunk tapes on a black airplane or a navy blue. Same situation here. And I reiterate this, and I have more trouble with people. They'll come in here with an iron, and they're going to, if you do that, your maul is fixing to not just be a tape come loose, you're going to have an unairworthy situation. Because if you lay that iron up on this and start doing this, you have sheared that glue joint. Now this piece is not coming off that rib here. But this piece can very well come off of that, because that will be just a peel ply. That's the most important joint right there. I like to lay it aside, let it dry for half a day, go ahead and shrink. Maul is pretty robust ribs. Now, I don't care. You can go be on your own on a Super Cub or whatever you want to do. I don't believe a Super Cub rib can take a full shrinking of 101 without that rib doing this. Javron can, it's pretty heavily built. You're on your own on what you're going to try to do this little situation. You can do it on experimental, but even with that, when you shrink this, be note of bowing this rib. But once you get that tight, then you're going to go in and you lay your mark, and I think there's about 1.5 inches or so mark here, something like that. Put your pencil line down, put your thin glue, let it dry, another thin glue, and then I like to go with a thick then, because it ain't like putting a tape on. We're doing structure. So, you know, get you a couple of coats of thin and maybe a good coat of thick bed of glue. And then, like I said, you're coming around all this and you're ready to put your next piece on. Now, this is just something that I do. If you come up here with a fresh piece of fabric and you take a razor and you try to cut your straight line, you're going to have this stuff right here. I actually will take a piece of aluminum, I'll draw me a pencil line, I'll take a thin glue and just barely wet that pencil line. That way it won't fray, and then lay a straight edge with it and take a razor and cut me a straight edge. You don't want this to be a pinked edge, because there's going to be a tape over it. Now when you got a razor cut edge that's cut on a pre-wetted edge, go ahead and cut everything. Now this is a kind of a tricky one here. The rest of them will just be straight. Let's just play like this has got the line and the glue. Now you've got this piece cut pretty good size. You hold that edge up, you've got it wetted in. What I like to do is know right where I'm gonna lay, and I like to lay it back, and I go ahead and lay some wet thin over it, activate everything, lay it right to the line, lay it in it, put your other thin on the top. Now you're gonna start going around and doing your whole thing the next time. That's if this one was right here and shrinked. Lay it to the side, and that's what you're doing. You're just doing those double laps all the way down. Now when you're done with all of that, there's a hard edge. You know, you're gonna have tape going around the trailing edge, and anywhere there's a hard point leaving, you'll have a tape. But right here, they encapsulate this. So here's your edge right here. You're gonna want a tape. You know, normally a 2-inch tape would go right there. They've got this just to kind of encapsulate that down. You know, if you take a piece of 3-inch, it's not going to really center on this. You could even put a 4-inch if you say, I want this thing really out to look symmetrical. That's all up to you. They put another piece of tape right here that covers this whole thing. This is a situation I think Maul now is using pre-shrunk tapes on the dark colored planes. Through time, I don't know what they used back early on glue, but everybody calls this is the joint that starts to give trouble, because urethane paints slowly tighten as they dry, and everything just keeps getting a little tighter and a little tighter, and this is the joint that they'll see start to come loose on there. So this is an important joint. Now, on experimental, the way I did on my Javron, I didn't want to have to deal with that joint moving or anything, so what I did was, after I was to this stage, took the tip of the iron and I just bedded that down to where I had that ironed out as smooth and as flat as I could. Then I did the double cover method. That way, everything, this cannot slide because I got a lightweight piece of fabric over the whole thing. It looked like glass all the way across, no stitching lines, no nothing. And and on double cover, I'll take that around the edge, and then the other one will come around that edge. Double cover, I'm not even gonna get into that. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not really a hard process. I'll probably do some more videos on it, but the problem with a double cover is if you get in a situation where you have an oil cannon situation, and then you can't get it to stick, you literally are gonna cut all the fabric off and start over. So I'm just saying, Maul does not do the double cover. That would be a great thing of Maul if they did do the double cover. They would completely cure this issue of this joint trying to move or whatever by just laying a thin, lightweight coat over it. So that's what they're doing. They're doing this vertical attachment point, and you just have to use your own. I mean, you're supposed to already be covered, and you're supposed to, if you're not an IA, you're supposed to have an IA involved. Everything has got to have if this does not have a pre-cover inspection in the logbook, then it's not legal. So your IA is going to have to be involved if you're doing this stuff on your own. All of this stuff is just normal procedure, cutting around something or whatever. But anytime fabric, this is a hard pull, peel ply, that's a legal joint, especially when if you come out here 2 inches and you laid another tape out another inch, that's considered the full lap, that extra one over the top. So that's what they're doing, is doing the vertical. But anytime you go vertical, you just cannot, you'll pull the fabric in two before you would pull that. So I've always thought it was a neat situation. I've even entertained the thought of on a stamped rib wing, if you want to just have one, a rib can't hardly take that, but you could stagger the shrinking down through it. There's a lot of ways this could work in if you had plenty of time. When I did mine, I timed it, and I think I could have one ready to go to primer in about 4 hours. I timed it on mine, versus the other way and then doing the stitching and laying the tapes on and everything. I think I double covered, and I was like 4 hours if I added them all up. So it's not really a longer process. It's just when you have your mind around it. But it's a matter of doing a section, letting it dry, doing another section. You're gonna be rotating about every piece you got through. So that's what I grasp on doing when people talk about doing the Maul tail feathers. There's probably something I said here doesn't really jive with what Maul recommends. I honestly believe you could cover it like a normal cub and stitch it and be done with it. I know that it'd be airworthy, but the legal side of it, I'm not sure if you have to do it like the Maul, like they do it. But anyhow, that's my 2 cents on it. Hope it helps someone just get an understanding. That's kind of the way I do it. I'm sure that the ladies over at Maul probably have a different procedure on this. I'm just about that pre-shrinking and getting it full tight. This is an important joint right here. I'm not sure just what process they go through on doing theirs. 20 minutes.